25 Most Terrifying Maniacs and Murderers in Human History. We are starting a series of publications about the most frightening and dark serial killers in human history. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode.
The Marksman Who Wanted a War. A Chronicle of Joseph Paul Franklin. Prologue. The man who hid in the roadside grass. He loved tall grass. He loved the hush behind shopping centers and the scrub lots beside parks, where city noise thinned to wind and his even breathing. He listened to his heart the way he listened for footsteps on asphalt, and he chose his moments not for escape, but for a shot. He was born James Clayton Vaughn, Jr., but he whittled himself into something else. He saluted Goebbels, borrowed Franklin, mixed the two and out, stepped Joseph Paul Franklin, a fanatic, a drifter, and a killer who dreamed of igniting a race war. In the late 1970s, he moved across the country like a draft through an unlatched window, invisible, palpable, and lethal. Part 1. The Childhood That Let Ghosts Out. Mobile, Alabama. 1950. A boy grows up in a house where a father disappears for weeks and months, returning drunk and violent, where a mother is strict and not given to comfort. At 7, a crash on a bike, eyes, head, pain, and an early grudge against the world. He will leave school early, clinging to books that sell hatred as a system. At 15, he steals a copy of Mein Kampf. At 17, he drops out. At 18, he marries and lasts 4 months. Then come radical circles, the American Nazi Party, then the National Socialist White People's Party, then the Klan, briefly not violent enough. In his mid-20s, he sheds his birth name and picks Joseph Paul Franklin, an ideologue's eye for symbols. None of this excuses anything. It only maps the roads along which a zealot ripened. He learned to love distance moral and ballistic, carbine, rifle, scope, the skill of vanishing. He lived in cars and cheap rooms, fed himself with savings and small bank robberies, and between them sold his blood at donor centers. $100 here, 2 or 3 visits there, and back to the road. That habit, a small thing, would someday snap his cloak of anonymity. Part 2. Years of Fire. A detailed timeline below is the backbone of events. Afterward, the story in faces. 1977, July 29th, fire and ruin. The Beth Shalom Synagogue in Chattanooga, Tennessee, is blown up by a homemade device. No one dies. Years later, he will be convicted for this bombing. August 7th, Easttown Mall parking lot, Madison, Wisconsin. Alphonse Manning, 23, and Tony Lynn Schwen, 23, a young interracial couple, are shot to death. In 1986, he receives 2 life terms for this double murder. October 8th, suburban St. Louis in Richmond Heights, outside Brith Shalom Knesset Israel Synagogue. He lies in the grass behind a utility pole, props his rifle on nails, and shoots at people leaving a bar mitzvah. Gerald Gordon, 42, is killed. 2 men are seriously wounded. For this murder, Missouri will sentence him to death, carried out in 2013. 1978, March 6th, Lawrenceville, Georgia. A sniper attack on Hustler publisher Larry Flynt and his attorney. Flynt survives but is paralyzed. No one is convicted. Years later, Franklin confesses. July 29th, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Outside a Pizza Hut, William Bryant Tatum is killed. His white girlfriend, Nancy Hilton, is wounded but survives. Franklin will be sentenced for this murder. 1979, July 12th, Doraville, Georgia. Through a window from distance, Harold Bruce McIver is killed inside a Taco Bell. Franklin later confesses. No trial is held. August 18th, Falls Church, Virginia. Raymond Taylor is shot through the glass of a Burger King. Franklin later admits the killing. October 21st, Oklahoma City. Jesse Eugene Taylor, 42, and Marion Vera Brissett, 31, an interracial couple, are murdered in a parking lot. Facts and ages are backed by county dockets. 1980, May 29th, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Civil rights leader Vernon Jordan is gravely wounded. In 1982, an all-white federal jury acquits Franklin of violating Jordan's civil rights. Franklin won't confess until 1996. June 8, Cincinnati, Ohio, Dante Evans Brown, 13, and Darrell Lane, 14, cousins out for candy, are shot from a railroad trestle. The investigation drags for 17 years. In 1998, he receives 2 life terms. June 15th, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, Arthur Dale Smothers, 22, and Kathleen McCullough, 16, are killed from a hillside near the Washington Street Bridge. Franklin will later be tied to the crime. August 20th, Salt Lake City, Utah, Liberty Park, Ted Fields, 20, and David Martin, 18, out running in the evening with 2 white friends, are gunned down. For this double murder, Franklin receives 2 life sentences, first in federal court, then in state court, 1981-1983. Arrest and after September 24, 1980, Kentucky, a traffic stop, weapons found in the car. At the station, he slips from an interview room, leaving behind a trail of evidence. October 28, 1980, Lakeland, Florida. He is arrested at a blood bank. The tattoos and a nationwide donor center bulletin give him away. From there, he begins his tour of courts across the map. Part 3. A portrait painted with powder and distance diagnosis as backdrop. Ideology as engine. There is no mystical riddle to his violence, only a slurry of trauma, ideas, and the convenience of distance. A childhood of violence and coldness taught him that the world is hostile. A head ocular trauma at age 7 and the aesthetics of the scope hooked him on the sensation of control at a remove. I am unseen. The world is a target. Then came ideology, conspiracy-flavored, simple as a leaflet, easily swallowing private rage. He dipped into hate subcultures but quickly tired of talk. He wanted deeds, not meetings. By the mid-1970s, his inner catechism congealed into a mission: punish black men near white women and Jews as enemies. He chose to be a preacher with a rifle. Risk factors, seen in hindsight. Early physical abuse and emotional neglect predictors of hardened dissociative coolness. Childhood head-eye trauma possible driver of impulsivity and tunnel focus. Ideological feed communities that romanticize anger. A nomad's life bleaches victims into categories and emboldens a sense of impunity. Positive reinforcement, successful ambushes, easy flights, quick robberies. He was not a ritualist. He was a missionary, an organized shooter who chose an idea as pardon and ambushcraft as trade. Rifle, distance, clean exit. The combination is fatally practical. Part 4. Who they were. Extended mini-biographies of victims, grouped as murders proven in court, homicides he confessed to was credibly tied to, and attempted murders where victims survived. A. Murders proven by verdict. Gerald Gordon, 42, St. Louis, Missouri. A family man, father of 3 daughters, killed outside a synagogue after a friend's bar mitzvah. A bullet pierced arm and chest. He died in the hospital. His death was the basis for Franklin's sole death sentence, carried out in 2013. Alphonse Manning, 23, and Tony Lynn Schwen, 23, Madison, Wisconsin. A young interracial couple gunned down at Easttown Mall. In 1986, a Dane County jury convicted Franklin. The prosecutor later recalled the murderer's icy dispassion. Ted Fields, 20, and David Martin, 18, Salt Lake City, Utah. Students and runners shot in Liberty Park at dusk. Franklin received 2 life terms, first for federal civil rights violations, then in state court. William Bryant Tatum, sources vary, 2022, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Shot near a Pizza Hut. His white girlfriend Nancy Hilton was wounded and survived. Franklin was sentenced for this too. Dante Evans Brown, 13, and Darrell Lane, 14, Cincinnati, Ohio. Cousins on a candy errand, the shots came from a railroad trestle above them. In 1998, the court imposed 2 life sentences. The families waited nearly 18 years to hear the truth. B. Homicides he confessed to credibly tied to Harold Bruce McIver, 27, Doraville, Georgia. A Taco Bell manager shot from range through a window. Confession without trial. Raymond Taylor, 28, Falls Church, Virginia, killed with a shot through the glass of a Burger King. Later admission by Franklin, Jesse Eugene Taylor, 42, and Marion Vera Brissett, 31, Oklahoma City. An interracial couple murdered on a supermarket parking lot. Ages and circumstances are consistent across retrospective dockets. Arthur Dale Smothers, 22, and Kathleen McCullough, 16, Johnstown, Pennsylvania. A couple slain near a bridge. Local press connected Franklin to the case the day he was executed. C. Survivors of attempted murder. Larry Flynt, hustler publisher. A catastrophic spinal injury left him paralyzed. Until his death, he argued against executing Franklin while never forgiving him. Vernon Jordan, prominent civil rights leader, gravely wounded. Franklin was acquitted by a federal jury in 1982, but confessed in 1996. No retrial on the same federal charges under double jeopardy rules. Franklin later tried to link himself to other episodes in interviews and letters. Some remain disputed. I've deliberately limited this list to what courts affirmed and to later confessions that remained consistent across sources. Part 5. How he hid and how they found him. His trade rode on 3 pillars: distance, ambush, rifle cover; drift, aliases, dyed hair, clean, used cars; self-funding, bank robberies; and blood donation. That last small habit proved fatal. In September 1980, Kentucky troopers found weapons during a stop. At the station, he fled an interview room, but left behind a coil of evidence. The FBI built a bulletin: tattoos, misanthropy, the habit of selling blood. Weeks later, a donor center employee in Florida called. The man from the poster was here. They took him in Lakeland without a shot. What followed was a long shuttle through jurisdictions, with confessions offered for transfers, for the chance to speak, for the odd need to be heard. He was heard and sentenced. Part 6. Failures and Missteps. By Police, Courts, and the System. 1. Federalism versus Seriality. The crimes were pushpins across states Wisconsin, Missouri, Tennessee, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio, Utah. In 1977 to 1980, the U.S. had not yet matured into today's integrated ballistics databases and VICAP-style patterning. Local cases rarely stitched into a national quilt. Franklin lived in the seams. 2. The Cincinnati case. 13-year-old Dante Brown and 14-year-old Darrell Lane. The file sat for 17 years. Prosecutors would later say they suspected him in 1980 but lacked evidence. He had sold the rifle. Witnesses were scarce. The eventual confession was won not by brute interrogation but by psychology. They sent a young female assistant prosecutor to talk to him, knowing his hunger for women's attention. It worked, but it took years. The families lived in a long silence. 3. Vernon Jordan proof collapses. A federal jury acquitted him. Witness reliability issues surfaced over time. 14 years later, Franklin confessed, but double jeopardy barred another federal trial. From a victim's standpoint, justice failed. 4. The Rainbow Murders, a wrongful conviction. 2 hitchhikers, Vicky Durian and Nancy Santamero, were shot in West Virginia in 1980. A local farmer, Jacob Beard, was convicted in 1993 on shaky testimony. Franklin later confessed. In 1999 to 2000, Beard was exonerated and compensated. It's a textbook result pressure error. Find someone at any cost instead of guarding the evidentiary standard. 5. Procedural oddities. In the Chattanooga synagogue bombing, Tennessee's High Court scrutinized an unusual hybrid representation. Jurors heard both counsel and the defendant's own closing. The conviction stood, but the court warned how exceptional such allowances should be. Experiments like that risked the legal hygiene of a trial. Bottom line. The errors were structural: fragmented jurisdictions, thin interstate ballistics, excessive trust in stories over evidence. Franklin lived in the cracks and, for a long time, never paid. Part 7. The courtroom gauntlet, a last breath and a victim's stance. His long legal life was a roller coaster of appeals. Life for Madison and Salt Lake City, time for Chattanooga, late life terms in Ohio, and death in Missouri for Gordon's murder. In 2013, Missouri's lethal injection protocol, forced by European drug bans, shifted to a single dose of compounded pentobarbital. Last-minute stays questioned the drug's source and secrecy. Higher courts lifted the stays. At 6:07 a.m., the injection began. At 6:17, he was pronounced dead. It was Missouri's first one-drug execution. Weeks before the execution, Larry Flynt publicly argued against it. "A state that tells its citizens not to kill should not kill," said the man Franklin had paralyzed. In the same breath, Flynt could imagine personal vengeance, yet defended the principle. Execution is not the answer. It is a difficult chorus victim's right to anger and a citizen's refusal to make death a policy. Part 8. The Madison chapter. How a city tells it. Some cases have their own oratorios. In Madison, the alt-weekly Isthmus rebuilt the timeline piece by piece. From a sudden 1984 confession, Franklin was angling for a transfer from Marion, and new confessions were tickets to new facilities, to the 1986 verdict. One detail stuck: Manning's family praying in the prosecutor's library while the jury deliberated. A city convinced the matter was buried exhaled uneasily, but lighter. Justice doesn't only work in verdicts, it stitches a community's torn fabric. Part 9. The St. Louis chapter, nails, a guitar case, grass, and numbers. A witness remembered the bar mitzvah as a farewell to boyhood and as a joy perforated by bullets. Franklin arrived early, picked his position. Tall grass behind a utility pole, 4-inch nails hammered into the wood as makeshift rests, the rifle hidden in a guitar case. He waited until early afternoon, fired 5 times, mounted a bicycle to a stashed car, and dissolved. He was attracted to numbers and signs, liked to talk about will and dreams, but the only numbers that stuck were different. Docket numbers, counts charged, dates of sentence. Part 10. Why Distance Seduces Evil, a brief meditation. Shooting from afar is not just technique, it is an ideology of absolution. Between an eye behind glass and a body on asphalt lie 100 meters of air in which biographies evaporate. An ambush shooter always scripts himself a pardon: I punish, I purify. Franklin industrialized that creed. Rituals, car cover exit, job sites, vacant lots, trestles, selection criteria. Black man with a white companion, a kippah, eligible. He was a missionary serial shooter whose weapon was not a knife or a noose, but a gaze through optics. Part 11. What to do about men like him, on risk and prevention. Early prevention sounds bland, but it is the only tool that bites into this profile. Domestic violence, school burnout, closed radical clubs, these are early forks in the road. Interstate connectivity is better now than in 1979. Bullet gun databases, biometrics, shared analytics. Yet drifters still exist. Finally, an ideological immune system. A lone wanderer with a carbine needs patrols, yes, but also a society where talk of enemies earns no applause. Part 12. Epilogue. The grass sways again. When they led him to the execution chamber, he said nothing. Witnesses noted a blink or two, a hard swallow, a few chest rises, then stillness. Across the country, a man in a wheelchair argued again. Execution is not the answer. 2 silences, one in that room, one in another, rhymed strangely. On the parking lots and city bridges of America, the grass moves again, not from gunfire, but from wind. That is the best ending to any story about violence. When wind reclaims the right to be the only thing that lifts and lays down the roadside grass. Appendix. A compact map of cases and sources, as referenced in the Russian original. Biographical arc. Early trauma. Radicalization. Donor center habit. Capture. FBI retrospectives. 2013-2014. Academic case summaries. Radford University. Name change and interactive timeline. The Salt Lake Tribune retrospective. St. Louis Gordon murder and ambush setup. St. Louis Public Radio feature. Madison Manning Schwen. Investigation and 1986 trial. Isthmus reconstruction. Salt Lake City Fields. Martin. Dual convictions. Federal state. Deseret News reporting and a 10th Circuit decision. Chattanooga synagogue bombing. Hybrid representation issue. Tennessee Supreme Court opinion. Chattanooga, Pizza Hut, Doraville, Taco Bell, Falls Church, Burger King, consolidated chronologies drawing on local reporting and case files. Oklahoma City Taylor Brissett, county prosecutor dossiers and retrospectives. Cincinnati Brown Lane confession, 1998 sentence. Local TV archive, WCPO. Fort Wayne Vernon Jordan, 1982 acquittal, later confession. The Washington Post, UPI, Deseret News. Johnstown, Pennsylvania link cited day of execution, Altoona Mirror. Execution in 2013, drug protocol, compound pharmacy secrecy, Times, Los Angeles Times, St. Louis Public Radio, The Guardian. Larry Flynt's stance against execution. The Hollywood Reporter column and major summaries.